Today I will tell you about the night my living room turned into a battlefield, not with fists or shouting, but with papers, signatures, and the quiet cruelty of someone I thought was family. I never imagined that the wedding day of my only daughter would also be the day I finally discovered myself. I was sitting upright in my chair, the ticking clock on the wall the only sound in the room. Henry, my brand new son-in-law, stood before me with a smile that was more blade than comfort. At his side was Anthony Collins, a notary whose leather folder bulged with official documents. They carried themselves like men who had already won. Henry's voice cut through the silence, steady and cruel. "This house is ours now. Sign the papers." Anthony placed the folder on the coffee table, his words flat, professional, stripped of empathy. He recited legal terms as though my home, my life, was nothing more than a transaction waiting to be stamped. I looked at them both, my face calm though my heart pounded. Then I smiled, the kind of smile that hides a storm. My words were soft, but every syllable carried weight. "Perfect. But instead of signing, why don't we go together to the police station? They are waiting for you, and they have already seen what I sent." For the first time, Henry's confidence faltered. His smirk slipped. Anthony's eyes darted nervously toward the door. In that instant, the balance of power shifted. They had come to corner me, yet suddenly they were the ones who looked trapped. I will never forget that moment. It was not only the night my son-in-law tried to take my house right after the wedding. It was also the night I proved to myself that I was stronger than their greed. If you are here with me now, do not forget to like this video, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. This is Grandma Life Stories, where we speak about love, betrayal, and the quiet justice of standing your ground. I remember the exact weight of the pen in my hand 2 weeks earlier, as I signed a check from my savings account. It was not a large sum by most people's standards, but for me, it was years of careful budgeting, nights of eating the same simple meals, days of walking instead of driving to save on gas, small sacrifices I had learned to make since my husband John passed away. That check was my gift to Hermione, my only daughter, so her wedding would shine without shadows. I believed I was giving her joy, and in my heart I felt certain that John would have approved. The Church of St. Paul stood proud against the Savannah sky, its white columns bright under the midday sun. Inside, light poured through stained glass windows, casting streaks of blue and crimson across the polished floor. Guests filled the pews, their voices hushed in anticipation. I held my breath as Hermione appeared at the end of the aisle, her dress a cascade of lace and satin. She looked radiant, almost otherworldly, her smile wide, her eyes fixed on Henry, the man waiting for her at the altar. From where I sat, my chest tightened. I wanted to feel only pride, but an unease gnawed at me. Weeks before the wedding, Henry had stopped by the house under the pretense of helping me with my taxes. He leaned over my kitchen table, his tone dripping with confidence. "These things can get messy these days," he said, scanning forms and receipts. "Let me take care of it for you. No need for you to get tangled in complicated paperwork." I remember the way his eyes flicked toward the deed folder tucked among my files, lingering for a fraction too long. I caught it, but dismissed it at the time. He was my future son-in-law, and I convinced myself it was nothing but curiosity. Now, watching him at the altar, straight-backed and composed, the memory pricked at me like a thorn. His smile looked polished, perfect, but something about it rang hollow. I tried to push the thought away. This was Hermione's day, and she deserved unbroken joy. The ceremony was beautiful. Vows were exchanged, rings slipped onto trembling fingers, and when Henry kissed Hermione, the church erupted in applause. My heart swelled in spite of myself. After all the years of loneliness since John's death, I thought perhaps I was finally being granted peace. At the reception, the ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers. The air smelled of champagne and roses. I sat at a round table with relatives and neighbors, watching Hermione glide across the dance floor with Henry. She looked like a child again in her joy, laughing with abandon. She hurried over to me later, cheeks flushed, excitement spilling out of her words. "Mom, look what Henry gave me." She held up a delicate bracelet, diamonds catching the light in sharp flashes. "Isn't it beautiful? He said it's a family piece, something that shows how serious he is about us." I forced a smile, nodding. The bracelet sparkled, but I knew Henry came from no old family wealth. I wondered silently how he could afford such extravagance, and whether this display was meant for Hermione's heart or for everyone else's eyes. Still, Hermione's delight was genuine, and I swallowed my doubts. During the toasts, Henry rose to speak. His voice carried smoothly across the room. He thanked friends, family, and finally me. "Dorothy has been incredible," he declared. "She's opened her heart, her home, and her support to us. I want everyone here to know how grateful we are for her generosity." The guests applauded warmly, and I smiled politely, though something in the phrasing unsettled me. Opened her home. Generosity. Words chosen too carefully. I caught Anthony Collins in the corner of the room, sitting with a small group of men. I did not know him then as anything more than one of Henry's acquaintances, but he watched me with a look I could not place. He raised his glass toward Henry, and Henry returned the gesture with a nod that seemed to carry a hidden understanding. As the evening stretched on, I drifted between conversations, accepting congratulations from friends who had known me since before John's passing. More than once I heard them whisper, "Hermione is so lucky. Henry is such a strong man, a good match." I smiled through it, but their words rang against the unease still gnawing at me. When the music slowed and Hermione leaned her head against Henry's chest, I allowed myself a fragile breath of relief. For her sake, I wanted to believe I was wrong. I wanted to believe Henry was Sim. But as the night ended and guests began to leave, Henry came to me, his arm around Hermione. "Dorothy," he said warmly, "we'll take good care of you. Don't you worry about a thing." Hermione beamed at me, glowing in the afterlight of her wedding. I kissed her cheek and whispered, "Be happy, my love." But Henry's words echoed in my head as I drove home alone. "We'll take good care of you." In that moment, I did not yet see the trap closing, but I felt the first threads tightening, and I told myself, foolishly, that worry was a burden best left at the door. The house was filled with chatter and the smell of roasted chicken, sweet tea, and cornbread. I had organized a small dinner a few days after the wedding, a family gathering before Hermione and Henry left for their honeymoon. It was meant to be warm and comforting, a moment to savor before they disappeared into their new life together. Hermione moved from room to room, glowing with excitement, laughing with friends who had gathered around the dining table. She wore the same smile she had worn at the altar, that bright, trusting expression that made my chest ache with both pride and worry. Henry stayed close to her, but made sure everyone noticed him. He shook hands too firmly, laughed too loudly, and told stories in a voice that filled every corner of the room. At first, I watched quietly, stacking dishes and making sure drinks were refilled. But then I noticed how people reacted to him. Hermione's friends, young women she had known since high school, whispered to each other between bites of salad. "He's so confident," one said with admiration. Hermione really found herself a man who knows how to handle things. Their words sounded like praise, but beneath it, I caught the edge of something else. Envy, maybe, or disbelief. They watched Henry like he was on a stage. Henry thrived on it. He leaned back in his chair, gesturing with his glass of wine as if he were giving a speech. "Savannah's real estate is a gold mine," he said to one of the men at the table. "If you play it right, you don't just buy property, you build empires. And trust me, I know how to play it right." His tone was slick, calculated. I froze when his eyes shifted toward me. He smiled politely, but the gleam in his gaze made my stomach tighten. "Dorothy," he said smoothly, his voice carrying enough volume for everyone to hear, "this house of yours is something else. Big, beautiful, but I bet it must feel like a burden sometimes. Keeping it up, paying for repairs, mowing that big yard. A lot of work for one woman, don't you think?" The words struck like a knife cloaked in velvet. The room went still for a moment, and I could feel eyes shifting toward me. My cheeks warmed, not from embarrassment, but from the cold cruelty hidden in his comment. It was an attack, disguised as casual conversation. Hermione laughed awkwardly and touched his arm. "Henry, don't tease. Mom loves this house. She and Dad built it together." Her voice was light, but I saw the shadow in her eyes. She wanted to believe he was joking, but even she heard the bite underneath. Henry chuckled, leaning down to kiss her forehead. "Of course, darling. I only mean that homes like this carry weight. We want your mom comfortable, don't we?" Then he turned back to me. "It's too much for one person. Eventually, you'll need a place that suits you better. Safer. Easier. You know I'm right." I tightened my grip on the serving spoon in my hand. I wanted to snap back, to call him out for the arrogance dripping from every syllable. Instead, I forced my lips into a smile. "Maybe so," I said evenly, "but this house has never felt like a burden. It feels like a promise kept." Henry's smile faltered for just a second before he raised his glass and laughed again, turning the attention back to his charm. But I caught it, the flash of annoyance. He wanted me to flinch, to show weakness, and I hadn't given him that satisfaction. Throughout the night, he dropped more subtle remarks. When someone complimented the antique china on the table, Henry said, "Beautiful pieces, but fragile. They belong in the hands of someone who can ensure they last, don't you think?" Another time, when talk turned to future plans, he remarked, "Hermione and I have dreams bigger than this old neighborhood, dreams that need the right foundation." Every word was dressed in elegance, but the meaning underneath was sharp as glass. He was not only signaling to me, but planting seeds in Hermione's mind and in the minds of everyone watching. I saw how my daughter beamed at him, too proud, too blinded by love to catch the poison in his compliments. After dessert, Hermione pulled me aside. She looked at me with the glowing eyes of a woman in love. "Isn't he amazing, Mom?" "Everyone thinks so. He just has this way about him. He makes everything sound possible." She clasped my hands tightly. "I'm so lucky, aren't I?" I smiled for her sake, squeezing her fingers. "You're happy, and that's all that matters to me." Inside, though, unease twisted like a knot. I wanted to shake her, to make her see what I saw, but I couldn't. She had chosen him, and she believed in him. For now, that belief was unshakable. When the last guest left and the house quieted, I lingered at the kitchen sink, washing plates while Hermione and Henry disappeared into laughter in the other room. The warm water on my hands did nothing to soften the chill in my chest. His words echoed in my head. "Too big for one woman. A burden. Eventually you'll need somewhere better." I told myself I was overthinking, that maybe I was too protective, too unwilling to let go. But as I stacked the plates to dry, I remembered the way Henry's eyes lingered on my deed folder weeks earlier. I remembered the forced sweetness in his praise of my generosity at the wedding. These were not accidents. They were patterns. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling fan spinning slowly in the dark. The next morning, I brewed coffee in my kitchen, hoping the warmth of the cup would steady my nerves. The sunlight spilled through the curtains, painting soft patterns on the table where John and I had once planned our entire lives. That quiet moment did not last. A knock at the door, firm and deliberate, shattered the stillness. When I opened it, Henry stood there, dressed too sharply for a casual visit, his hand resting on the shoulder of a man I had only glimpsed at the reception. Anthony Collins, a notary. His briefcase looked heavy enough to crush the air out of the room. Henry's smile was wide but hollow. "Dorothy, good morning. We thought we'd stop by, just to talk." Without waiting for my reply, he stepped inside, Anthony trailing behind him. They moved like they owned the space, and I felt the temperature of the house drop as they entered. We sat in the living room. Henry lowered himself into the armchair opposite me, crossing one leg over the other, exuding a confidence that reeked of arrogance. Anthony placed his briefcase neatly on the coffee table, clicked it open, and withdrew a neat stack of papers. The sound of those clasps snapping open was louder than it should have been, like a gavel striking wood. Henry spoke as if we were having a friendly chat. "Dorothy, I've been thinking about you, about your comfort. You've lived in this house a long time, and it's a lot to handle, isn't it?" Sunset Manor is one of the best assisted living communities in Georgia. Safe, caring. They've already reserved a suite for you. Think of it as a gift from us." I stared at him, my coffee untouched, the steam rising like smoke from a fire. "A gift?" My voice was even, though I could feel the pounding of my pulse. "You came here with a notary, Henry. That doesn't sound like a gift. It sounds like a transaction." Anthony cleared his throat, his tone rehearsed, sterile. "Mrs. Hale, these are standard documents. They simply transfer title of the property to Henry and Hermione, ensuring they can manage affairs on your behalf. In return, they will cover all costs of Sunset Manor for the first year. After that, arrangements can be reviewed." His words landed like stones in water, heavy and deliberate. A single year. My house, my memories, my independence, in exchange for 1 year of being parked in a facility. Henry leaned forward, lowering his voice as though speaking gently. "Dorothy, this house is too much for you. The stairs, the yard, the maintenance. You shouldn't have to worry about any of that. Let us take care of it. Let us take care of you." I set the cup down with more force than I intended. Take care of me? Or take from me? The smile on his face froze, but his eyes flared. Anthony shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Henry tried again, this time with a sharper edge. "We're offering you dignity. A beautiful room, professional care, peace of mind. What do you have left here besides crumbling bricks and ghosts? You should be thanking us." I felt the sting of his words, but I refused to show it. This house is not crumbling. It's standing just as I am, and I will not sign away my life for a brochure and a false promise. Anthony tapped the papers lightly, trying to regain control. "Mrs. Hale, I understand this feels sudden, but truly, it is in your best interest. You'll be more comfortable there, and your children—" I cut him off. "My daughter has not asked for this. She knows nothing of this little visit, does she?" Neither man answered. Henry's jaw tightened, and Anthony's eyes darted downward. The silence was confirmation enough. I pushed the papers back across the table, the edges scraping against the wood. "You've wasted your time. I will not sign." Henry's mask cracked then. His tone, once syrupy, turned sharp as glass. "Don't be stubborn, Dorothy. This is happening whether you like it or not. The longer you resist, the harder it will be." I held his gaze without blinking. "Then make it hard, Henry, because you will not win today." The air between us was electric, thick with unspoken threats. Anthony closed his briefcase slowly, his movements stiff. He avoided my eyes, but I caught the flicker of something, hesitation, maybe even regret, before he snapped the locks shut. Henry rose from his chair, looming over me. For a moment he looked ready to lash out. Instead, he forced a smile that looked more like a snarl. "Think about it. We'll be back." His words dripped with menace, a promise more than a warning. I stayed seated, my back straight, my voice calm. "You'll find me in the same place you left me, and this house will still be mine." They left, their footsteps heavy against the hardwood floor, the front door slamming harder than necessary. The silence that followed was deafening. I sat there, the papers still on the table, the ghost of Henry's threat lingering in the air. I should have been afraid, but I wasn't. What I felt was something different, something sharper. The battle lines had been drawn. Henry thought he had cornered me. He was wrong. I had spent decades surviving storms bigger than him, and this was just another one. That morning changed everything. There was no mistaking his intentions now. When Henry and Anthony left my house that morning, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the frames on the walls, I stood frozen in the silence they left behind. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from fury contained. I knew this was not over. That evening, Hermione stopped by, her face glowing from the newness of marriage, but her eyes clouded with questions. I sat her down at the kitchen table, the same table where Henry had dropped his poison earlier that day. "Hermione," I began carefully, "your husband came here today. He brought a notary. They pushed papers across this table and told me to sign my house over. They spoke of Sunset Manor as if I should pack my bags tomorrow." Her fork clattered onto her plate. "What? Mom, that can't be right. He wouldn't do that without me." I locked eyes with her. "He did. And he expected me to bow my head and thank him for it." She blinked rapidly, her lips parting as though she might defend him, but the words tangled. I saw the battle in her face, loyalty to her husband, disbelief toward her mother. "Henry, he said he just wants what's best for you. Maybe he thought—" I cut her off, my voice sharper than I intended. "Best for me? Hermione, don't be naive. He wants this house. He wants control. You may not see it yet, but I do." She recoiled slightly, hurt flashing across her expression. "Mom, please. He loves me. He loves us. He's trying to make sure you're safe." "Safe," I repeated bitterly. "Stripped of my independence, locked away in a place I never chose, while he signs his name over mine. If that's safety, then I'll take my chances without it." Tears welled in her eyes, and I knew I had driven the knife too deep. She rose abruptly, muttering that she needed to talk to Henry. I let her go. Nothing I said would matter until she saw his mask slip with her own eyes. Later that night, while I lay awake staring at the dark ceiling, Hermione was confronting Henry in their new apartment. She told me about it afterward, and the memory still burns. "Henry," she said, pacing their living room, "Mom told me what you did. You went to her with a notary, without me. You tried to get her to sign away the house." Henry leaned back against the sofa, unbothered. "Hermione, she's exaggerating. You know how your mother is. Always suspicious, always clutching the past. I was thinking of her. Sunset Manor would take away the burden." "It doesn't sound like that," Hermione shot back. "It sounds like you cornered her." That was when Henry changed tactics. He stood, crossed the room, and pulled her into his arms. His voice broke, practiced cracks of vulnerability. "Hermione, please, don't doubt me. I've fought my whole life to build something out of nothing. Do you know what it was like growing up in my house? My father drank himself into oblivion. My mother begged creditors on her knees. I swore I would never let my family live like that. I swore I would protect us." Hermione's anger faltered. His tears, though false, looked real enough in the dim light. He pressed his forehead against hers. "Everything I do for us. For you. For the family we're going to build. Your mother. She doesn't see it. She can't. She's stuck in her grief, stuck in the past. But you and I, we're the future. Don't let her tear us apart." Hermione whispered, "But she's my mother. I can't just ignore her." His arms tightened around her, his voice dropping to a dagger's edge wrapped in silk. "Then you have to choose, Hermione. A mother who will one day be gone, or a husband who will walk beside you for the rest of your life. Which family matters more? The one fading, or the one we're building right now?" The question cut her in half. She had always dreamed of a strong family, of belonging, of a husband who would protect her. Now, Henry twisted that dream into a weapon. When she returned to me the next day, her eyes were red-rimmed, her hands trembling. She sat at my table in silence, unable to meet my gaze. I asked nothing. Her silence told me everything. Henry had gotten to her. I poured her tea, the sound of the liquid filling the cups louder than the air between us. Finally, she whispered, "He said he only wants to protect me, that he's thinking about our future. He says you don't understand." I swallowed the sharp retort that burned in my throat. I wanted to shake her awake, but I saw the chains of love binding her. To attack him now would only push her further into his arms. So I nodded slowly and said, "If that's what you believe, then I hope he proves it true." Inside, I felt the walls of my house closing in. I had faced Henry's ambition head-on, but now I saw the greater danger. He wasn't just trying to take my home. He was taking my daughter's loyalty, her trust, her very sense of family. He was painting me as the obstacle to their happiness. That realization was heavier than any threat he had spoken to me. It left me sitting alone in my kitchen long after Hermione left, staring at the faded wallpaper, listening to the creaks of the old house. For the first time in years, I felt the sharp sting of solitude, not because I had lost John, but because I was losing Hermione to a man who knew exactly how to make her choose him over me. And in that moment, I understood that the battle ahead would not just be about deeds and signatures, it would be about hearts. I knew I could not sit back and wait for Henry to return with more tricks up his sleeve. The morning after Hermione left my kitchen in tears, I unlocked the fireproof box I had kept hidden for years. Inside were the papers John and I had guarded like treasure: the deed to the house, the canceled check that proved my $15,000 down payment for Hermione's wedding had been a loan, and most importantly, the power of attorney I had signed months earlier. That document carried a clause most people would have overlooked, but I had insisted my lawyer include it. It could only be invoked if 2 licensed physicians declared me incompetent. Without that, no one, least of all Henry, could claim control of my affairs. I spread the documents across the kitchen table, the paper crisp against the worn wood. These were not just sheets of ink and signatures. They were my defense, my shield. I rehearsed what I would do when Henry came back. I would not plead, I would not explain. I would let the truth sit there, solid and undeniable, in black and white. It did not take long. By late afternoon, the sound of his car pulling into the driveway cut through the silence. A moment later, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, Henry stood there, sharper than ever in a tailored suit, his smile polished, but his eyes already hard. Anthony Collins followed, his briefcase in hand, his face unreadable. "Dorothy," Henry said, stepping inside without waiting for my invitation, "I trust you've had time to think. Let's make this easy. Sign, and we can move forward with dignity." I did not move from the table. Instead, I gestured to the stack of papers neatly arranged in front of me. "Sit down, Henry. You too, Mr. Collins. If we're going to talk about dignity, we should start with facts." Henry's eyes flicked to the documents. For the first time since this charade began, his smile faltered. He sat, slowly, his jaw tightening. Anthony took the chair beside him, his gaze sharp as he studied the papers. I placed my hand on the deed, sliding it toward them. "This house belongs to me. It has my name, and it always will. The loan for the down payment on your wedding is documented here, with terms you agreed to. And this," I tapped the power of attorney, "is conditional. Unless 2 doctors declare me incapable, no one touches my affairs. Not you, not anyone." Henry tried to mask his unease with a laugh. "Dorothy, you don't need to be defensive. We just want to help you transition to a place better suited for your needs. These documents don't change the fact that Sunset Manor is safer for you." I leaned forward, my voice steady, cutting through his pretense. "Safer for me or safer for you? Because what I see is a man grasping at something he didn't build, trying to use kindness as a wedge. That ends today." Anthony cleared his throat, his eyes lingering on the conditional clause in the power of attorney. I could see the flicker of recognition, the awareness that Henry's plan was far less airtight than he had been led to believe. Henry noticed it too. He snapped, his tone sharper. "Don't be misled, Anthony. She's bluffing. These papers won't stop what's coming." I smiled coldly. "Bluffing? I've kept these documents longer than you've known my daughter. I know exactly what I'm holding. And so does Mr. Collins." Anthony adjusted his glasses, speaking carefully. "This clause, it would make power of attorney unenforceable unless—" He trailed off, catching Henry's glare. But the damage was done. He had acknowledged the truth aloud. Henry slammed his hand against the table, making the cups rattle. "Enough games, Dorothy. You think a few pieces of paper can protect you? You can't hold out forever. You're alone. Eventually, someone will see you for what you are, a bitter old woman clinging to a house too big for her." I met his fury with calm steel. "Maybe I am old, Henry, but I am not alone, and I am not weak. If you want this house, you'll have to do more than throw insults. You'll have to go through the law. And I promise you—" I leaned closer, my eyes locked on his. "The law is on my side." Anthony shifted again, silent but restless. His eyes darted between us, calculation flickering across his face. He was not loyal to Henry. He was loyal to self-preservation, and I could feel the ground beneath Henry starting to shift. Henry stood abruptly, his composure cracking. "This isn't over. You'll regret humiliating me like this." I straightened my back, my voice calm, decisive. "The only thing I regret is letting you think you could ever intimidate me. Leave my house, Henry. Both of you." For a heartbeat, the room was still. Then Anthony gathered his papers, his expression unreadable, and rose. Henry lingered, his fists clenched, before finally turning and storming toward the door. The slam echoed like a gunshot through the house. When the silence settled again, I let out the breath I had been holding. My hands trembled slightly, but not from fear, from resolve. Henry had seen the first wall of resistance, and he knew now I would not fold. He would come back, I had no doubt, but so would I, stronger each time. And though Anthony had left without a word, I caught that glint in his eyes. He was calculating, reassessing. He might still be Henry's ally, but he had seen the truth in those papers. That truth had planted a seed, and I knew one day it would grow. The news came like a thunderclap. I had just finished watering the garden when a neighbor's teenage son handed me an envelope. The paper was heavy, official, the seal of the Chatham County Court pressed into the corner. My hands shook as I tore it open. A summons. I was being ordered to appear in court for a competency hearing. My breath caught in my throat. Henry and Anthony had gone further than threats. They had put their lies into the hands of a judge. Inside the packet was a copy of their petition. I read every line, my pulse hammering in my ears. It accused me of cognitive decline, of being incapable of managing my own affairs. Attached were statements that made bile rise in my throat. A fabricated report from a doctor I had never seen, claiming I showed consistent signs of memory loss, confusion, and impaired judgment. Testimonies from supposed witnesses, neighbors who said I wandered the streets at night, forgot basic details, and posed a danger to myself. I knew immediately these were lies. One page stopped me cold. Anthony Collins had notarized the false medical report. His name, his signature, right there. The man who had sat at my table, feigning neutrality, had become the instrument of Henry's scheme. By the time Hermione arrived that evening, I was sitting at the table with the papers spread around me like debris from a storm. She picked one up, her face paling as she scanned the accusations. "Mom, oh God." "Your husband," I said, my voice like stone, "and his notary friend have declared me incompetent. They want the court to strip me of control. They want me out of my home." She sank into the chair across from me, tears welling in her eyes. "He told me he was only protecting you. I didn't think he would," I interrupted sharply. "He has crossed the line. There is no hiding behind love now. This is war." Word spread quickly. By the next morning, whispers ran through the neighborhood like wildfire. Mrs. Green from across the street stopped me on the sidewalk. "Dorothy, I heard about the hearing. Are you all right? People are saying you've been confused lately." Her voice faltered, uncertain whether to pity or judge. "I am fine, Eleanor," I replied, standing straighter than I felt. "Confusion is not my disease. Greed is theirs." The rumors only grew. At the grocery store, I saw neighbors glance my way, their conversations halting as I passed. Some offered sympathetic smiles, but others looked at me with suspicion, as though wondering if I truly was the frail old woman Henry painted me to be. Their doubt cut deeper than Henry's insults. He was trying not only to steal my home, but to poison my reputation. Hermione returned the next day, her eyes swollen. She confessed what Henry had told her the night before. "He says you left the stove on last month, that you locked yourself out of the house 3 times, that you can't manage bills without his help." I slammed my fist against the table. "All lies. Hermione, you know me. You know I'm capable." She flinched, torn in half. "I want to believe you, Mom, but he's my husband. He says he has proof. What am I supposed to do?" I grabbed her hand. "Look at me. I raised you. I built this home brick by brick. Does this look like the face of a woman who cannot manage her own life?" She wept, silent tears running down her cheeks, but she said nothing. That silence was worse than any denial. Days later, Henry came swaggering into my driveway as though he owned it already. He carried himself like a man confident of victory. "Dorothy," he said smoothly, "don't make this harder than it has to be. The court will see the truth. Everyone already knows you're slipping. Just sign now and save yourself the humiliation." I faced him squarely. "The only humiliation here is yours. You think forged papers and false words will bury me. But you forget, I've buried worse men than you." His grin faltered, but he pressed on. "Anthony and I have everything lined up. Doctors, witnesses, even the neighbors see it. You're finished." I held his stare, refusing to blink. "Then I'll see you in court." That night, I sat alone, staring at the summons on the table. The weight of it pressed down like iron chains. I knew the road ahead would be brutal. The law could be slow, blind, and easily swayed by polished lies. But I also knew something Henry could never understand. I had nothing left to lose but my dignity, and that was something I would never surrender. As I blew out the lamp and let the darkness settle around me, I whispered into the silence, "You picked the wrong woman to bury." The house felt heavier than it ever had before. Every corner carried shadows longer than they should have been, stretching across the walls like accusations. I sat in the living room with no lamps lit, only the pale light of the moon spilling through the blinds. The stack of court papers lay unopened on the coffee table. I couldn't bring myself to touch them again. The silence pressed in on me. For years this home had been filled with voices. John's deep laugh when the roof leaked, Hermione's squeals as she ran through the hallway. Now, it was only the echo of my own breathing. I rose slowly and walked to the mantel, where a single photograph rested in a wooden frame. It was taken 20 years ago, John, Hermione, and me at Tybee Beach, squinting against the sun. My hair was darker then. His arm was wrapped tight around me. Hermione's smile was the brightest thing in the picture. I picked it up, my fingers trembling. The glass felt cold, like the world pressing itself into my hands. I whispered into the stillness, "John, what would you do if you were here?" My throat ached with the weight of unshed tears. They've turned her against me. They're painting me as a woman who's lost her mind. And maybe everyone will believe them. The thought cut deeper than any blade. Neighbors I had baked pies for, friends I had prayed with, now looking at me with pity and doubt. My own daughter torn between loyalty to me and devotion to her husband. I pressed the photo to my chest, clutching it as if it could steady me against the tide rising in my own house. I slid down into the armchair, shaking. The weight of failure pressed hard. The judge believed enough to set a hearing. The neighbors whispered. Even Hermione looked at me with hesitation. The isolation was suffocating, as though the very walls John built to keep us safe had turned against me. For the first time in years, I let myself cry without holding back. The tears burned as they carved tracks down my cheeks. My shoulders shook, and the sound of my sobbing filled the hollow spaces of the house. It was the sound of a woman cornered, stripped of every ally, left to fight shadows alone. But as the sobs subsided, something shifted inside me. My eyes fell once again to the photograph. John's face, steady and proud, seemed to stare back at me. I remembered his words the day we signed the mortgage on this house. He had said, "Dorothy, this place isn't just bricks and nails. It's a promise. We'll build something here that no one can take from us." The memory tightened my grip on the frame. My hands still trembled, but now it wasn't fear, it was fury. I set the picture back on the mantel carefully, almost reverently, and rose to my feet. I looked at the shadows again, but they no longer seemed so large. I spoke aloud, my voice raw, but steady. "If I don't stand now, I'll lose everything. This house, my daughter, my dignity. They think I'm weak. They think age has dulled me. They're wrong." I walked back to the table, pulled the summons toward me, and unfolded it again. The words no longer seemed like a death sentence. They looked like a challenge. I traced the seal of the court with my finger and whispered, "You picked the wrong widow." The clock in the hallway struck midnight. Its chime echoed through the empty house, sharp and unforgiving. But this time, instead of feeling alone, I felt ready. Each strike was a drumbeat, a call to battle. I pressed my palm flat against the papers, anchoring myself. John, I will not let them destroy what we built. I will not let them bury me before my time, and I will not let Hermione believe their lies. If I fall, it will be standing tall. The despair was still there, heavy in my bones, but under it burned something sharper: resolve. I wiped the tears from my face with the back of my hand, drew a deep breath, and straightened my spine. The house, my house, seemed to exhale with me, as though it too had decided not to surrender. I blew out the last candle in the room. Darkness wrapped around me, but for the first time in days, I was not afraid of it. I woke the next morning with swollen eyes but a sharpened mind. The despair of the night before had burned away, leaving only the clarity of someone with nothing left to lose. If Henry and Anthony wanted to drag me into court, I would not walk in trembling. I would walk in carrying evidence of their cruelty. The first step was practical. I opened the fireproof box where John and I had always kept our documents. I laid everything out across the dining table: the original deed, the loan papers, the conditional power of attorney. I slid them into folders with tabs, my hands steady now. Elder financial abuse was a crime, and I intended to prove it. But paper alone would not save me. Hermione was the key. She was torn, drifting between me and her husband's lies. I needed to reach her, not with anger, not with lectures, but with the one story she had never truly heard, the story of her father. That afternoon I called her. My voice was calm. "Hermione, can you come over tonight? I need to talk to you, not about Henry, not about the case, about your father." There was a pause, then a soft sigh. "All right, Mom, I'll come." When evening came, I brewed her favorite chamomile tea. She stepped into the kitchen, shoulders hunched, eyes red from nights of conflict. She sat at the table without a word, waiting. I slid the cup toward her, then folded my hands. "Hermione," I began, "you know pieces of your father's story, but not all of it. You were too young when it happened. Tonight, I want you to hear it from me." She looked up slowly, her lips pressed tight. "Your father believed in people. Too much. When you were 8, he went into business with a man named Carl Jennings. On paper, it looked like a partnership, expansion, new opportunities. But Carl had no intention of building anything. He siphoned funds, forged invoices, left your father with debts that nearly crushed us." Hermione's hand trembled as she lifted the cup. "I remember whispers. You and Dad arguing in the kitchen, but I didn't understand." "You weren't meant to. I shielded you from it. But the truth is, we almost lost this house. We almost lost everything. John worked double shifts, I picked up extra cleaning jobs, and we clawed our way back from the edge. He never forgave himself for being deceived. It ate at him until the day he died." Her eyes widened, the pain of old wounds surfacing. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because, Hermione," I leaned forward, my voice low but unflinching, "you are walking the same path. You are trusting a man who smiles while plotting behind your back, just like Carl did to your father. And just like your father, you may not see it until it's too late." She gasped softly, her eyes filling. "No, Henry isn't—" "Look at me," I interrupted, my voice firm. "Your father's trust nearly destroyed us. Henry is using your love to destroy me. Can you not see the shadow of history repeating itself?" She buried her face in her hands, sobs breaking loose. "I don't know what to believe. He tells me everything he does is for us, for our future. He cries, Mom. He tells me he grew up with nothing, that he swore he'd never let his family suffer the way he did. And in the same breath he's stealing from your mother," I said sharply. "He is not building a future. He is tearing down your family's foundation, brick by brick." The room went silent, except for her crying. I reached across the table and placed my hand over hers. "I am not your enemy, Hermione. I have never been. But if you keep siding with him blindly, you will lose both me and yourself. Con is walking the very road that ruined your father." Her shoulders shook as she whispered, "I don't want to choose." "You already are choosing," I said, my tone cutting through the quiet. "Every time you let his lies go unchallenged, Every time you doubt me, you are making a choice, and one day, when the truth explodes, it will be too late to undo." She lifted her tear-streaked face, her voice trembling. "What do you want me to do?" "Open your eyes. Stop accepting his words at face value. Look. Search. If Henry is as honest as he claims, you will find nothing, but if he is what I know he is, then you will see the proof with your own eyes." Hermione stared at me, breathing hard, then nodded faintly. I'll try." It wasn't a promise, but it was enough. For the first time since the nightmare began, I saw a crack in Henry's armor. If Hermione looked too closely, his lies would not withstand the light. That night, after she left, I gathered the papers once more. The legal fight was one battlefield. The fight for my daughter's heart was another. I intended to win both. As I blew out the candle, the photograph on the mantel caught my eye again. John's smile seemed less like a memory and more like a reminder. I barely slept, but the next day Hermione called me. Her voice was different, quieter, as though something had cracked open inside her. "Mom, I can't stop thinking about what you said." I didn't push. I only told her, "When the truth scares you, that's usually when you're closest to finding it." She didn't reply, but later she told me what happened afterward. It was nearly midnight when she slipped out of bed. Henry's steady breathing filled the room. She tiptoed across the carpet, her bare feet silent, her hands trembling. She had never searched her husband's things before. She told me later her heart pounded so hard she thought it would wake him. She started with his briefcase. It sat by the desk, polished leather gleaming even in the dark. She eased the buckle open and rifled through the stack of envelopes. Most were bills, but then her fingers brushed over documents thick with numbers, mortgage statements, overdue notices, red stamps of delinquency. Her breath caught. Henry had told her everything was handled. Yet here were months of unpaid debts. She slid the papers back quickly, her pulse racing. But something pushed her on. She turned to his laptop. The screen glowed faintly as it woke, demanding a password. For a moment, she froze, then tried the obvious. Her birthday. It worked. That small carelessness told her more than she wanted to know. The inbox loaded slowly. Her eyes darted across subject lines until one froze her in place. From Henry to Anthony Collins. She clicked. The message was blunt. "Just get her signature. Once the old woman signs, the house is ours." The words seared themselves into her mind. She read them again, unable to believe they came from the man she had married weeks before. He hadn't even softened the language. No pretense of care, just calculation. She scrolled further. Another email. "If she resists, we push the incompetency angle. Collins, you know what to do." Hermione clapped a hand over her mouth to stifle a cry. Tears blurred her vision, but she forced herself to keep reading. The correspondence laid out their entire scheme, the nursing home plan, the fabricated reports, the push to corner me. She snapped the laptop shut, nearly dropping it. Her body shook so violently she feared she'd collapse. Later she told me that in that moment, standing in the dark with her husband's lies spread before her, she felt as though the ground itself had split open. The man she had defended, the man she had promised to love, had written in cold print his intent to strip his mother-in-law of everything. She shoved the laptop back onto the desk and returned to bed. Henry stirred, muttering in his sleep, but didn't wake. She lay beside him, eyes wide open, the glow of betrayal burning hotter than any nightmare. The next morning, she couldn't look at him the same. Every word he spoke, every smile, felt rehearsed. But she said nothing. Not yet. She carried the secret like a stone in her chest, waiting for the right moment to use it. When she finally came to me days later, her voice cracked as she whispered, "Mom, you were right." Then she broke down, telling me everything, every email, every document, every shred of proof she had seen with her own eyes. I didn't embrace her immediately. I let her speak, let the truth pour out of her in sobs and gasps. Only then did I place a hand on her shoulder and say, "Now you know why I can't give up." She nodded through her tears, the weight of her discovery pressing hard. She had seen Henry unmasked, and there was no turning back. I knew that paper and courtroom procedures alone would not break Henry's plan. Anthony Collins was more than a notary. He was the hinge of the entire scheme. If he shifted, the door would swing in my favor. But to move him, I needed more than anger. I needed memory. So I went where truth hides, into the past. The Savannah Public Library was quiet that morning, dust motes dancing in beams of sunlight through tall windows. I took a seat at a long wooden table and requested reels of microfilm. Old newspapers whirred onto the screen, their headlines stark in black and white. At first, I searched for cases like mine, property disputes, elder abuse, land schemes. Then a tiny column from 30 years ago caught my eye. Collins' family land case dismissed. My pulse quickened. It detailed how Anthony's mother had lost her farmland after signing documents she did not fully understand. Words leapt at me. Fraudulent deed, pressure, loss of inheritance. I sat back, whispering to myself, so that's why he looked away every time Henry bragged. The pieces fit together. Anthony knew too well the cost of deceit. He had lived it. That evening, I asked Anthony to meet me in the church courtyard. He arrived in his gray suit, neat as ever, his eyes wary. "Mrs. Hale," he said, his voice clipped, "Henry told me you wanted clarification on the legal process. I can assure you everything has been handled within the law." I didn't raise my voice. I simply held up the folded newspaper copy. Within the law, those were the same words used when your mother's land was stolen, weren't they? His face froze. The polished mask cracked just enough to reveal something raw beneath. He reached for the paper, but I pulled it back. "You see," I continued, "I went digging. Savannah archives, old cases. Your family name appears in black and white. Your mother trusted men who said they were helping, and in the end, she lost everything." He swallowed hard, his jaw tightening. "That has nothing to do with this." "It has everything to do with this," I pressed, stepping closer. "You know better than anyone what it feels like when the ground under your feet is ripped away. And now you stand beside Henry, repeating the very cruelty that scarred your own childhood. Tell me, Anthony, do you want your name in the record books again? As a man who preyed on widows and the elderly?" For the first time, he looked away. His hands fidgeted with his pen, clicking it open and shut. His voice faltered. "I am just a facilitator. I don't decide family conflicts." "No," I said, cutting through his excuse, "but you choose whether to be part of fraud. You can walk away, or you can be remembered as the man who legitimized theft from a 68-year-old widow. Which history do you want to carry?" Silence stretched between us. The church bells rang the hour, echoing over the square. He didn't answer, but his eyes betrayed him. For a flicker of a moment, guilt took root. I leaned in one last time, my voice steady. "Anthony, you can still decide. When this goes to court, I will not be the only one speaking. Do you really want to be listed beside Henry in a case of elder financial abuse?" He said nothing, but his shoulders slumped as if a weight had settled on him. I turned to leave, the newspaper still in my hand. As I walked away, I felt it. The first crack in their wall. The seed had been planted, and I knew seeds have a way of breaking through stone. The week before the hearing, my house no longer felt like a home. It felt like a war room. Every surface was covered with folders, envelopes, and notes in my own handwriting. I had no luxury of rest. The clock ticked louder with every passing hour, as if it were counting down not just to the court date, but to judgment itself. I knew one thing clearly. I could not let Henry and Anthony twist the law against me. If they planned to present forged medical reports, I needed the truth from real doctors. So I drove to Dr. Chen's office, the physician who had treated me for over 12 years. She welcomed me with the same calm smile that had seen me through flu seasons and grief. "Dorothy, what brings you here?" I placed the notice of incompetency on her desk. The paper shook only slightly in my hand. "They're claiming I can't make decisions for myself. I need an official evaluation, and I need it in writing." Her brows furrowed, scanning the document. "This is serious. Who filed this?" "My son-in-law, with Anthony Collins backing him." Dr. Chen set her pen down firmly. "You are one of the sharpest patients I've ever had. I'll arrange a cognitive assessment immediately. And Dorothy, I'll stand by you in court if it comes to that." The tests were thorough. Memory recall, logic exercises, coordination. I passed each one. When she handed me the signed report declaring me fully competent, I felt strength return to my bones. Evidence, real evidence. But legal papers were only half of the battle. The heavier burden was Hermione. I could see her unraveling each time we spoke. Her eyes darted between me and Henry as if she were standing on a fault line, waiting for the earth to split. One evening she came over. She paced my kitchen like a restless bird, twisting her wedding ring. "Mom, you don't understand. He says all of this is for our future. He says you'll be safer at Sunset Manor than rattling around this big old house alone." And I looked at her squarely. "Hermione, safety built on lies is no safety at all. You saw the emails. You saw the debts. How much more do you need?" Tears welled in her eyes. "He cries, Mom. He tells me he's terrified of losing everything. And I believe him, even when I don't want to." Her words cut deep, because I recognized the same desperation John once had when he fought to save our home decades earlier. But John never betrayed us to get out of debt. Henry, however, was willing to sacrifice anyone. I leaned across the counter. "Hermione, I am your mother. I am flesh and blood. And I am telling you, Henry is using your love as a shield while he robs me. If you keep defending him, he'll take this house, and in time, he'll take you too." She froze, her breathing shallow. Then she whispered, "I don't know how to choose." "You already are choosing," I said, my voice sharp as glass. She left soon after, her confusion heavy in the air. I knew I had pressed hard, but the truth demanded it. Meanwhile, Henry grew bolder. He swaggered into the driveway one night, knocking on the door without Hermione. When I opened it, he smirked. "You think a few old files will save you? Anthony is making sure everything checks out. The court will side with me, not a forgetful widow." I met his gaze with cold steel. "I am not the one who should be worried about the court." For a moment his jaw tightened, but then he laughed. "Keep pretending, Dorothy. In a few days, all of this will belong to us." He tapped the doorframe like it was already his property and left without another word. I stood in the silence, the echo of his arrogance burning into my resolve. If he thought I would crumble, he had miscalculated. The nights were the hardest. The house creaked and groaned, and I sat alone with the ticking clock, every second dragging me closer to the trial. I spread my documents in order: deed, loan papers, doctor, Chen's report, and Hermione's unspoken testimony in her haunted eyes. One night I caught my reflection in the darkened window. My face was older, lined with years of love and loss, but my eyes, they were not broken. They burned. I whispered to the reflection, to John, to myself, "They will not take me down, not this time." As dawn broke on the final day before court, I placed the evidence into a leather folder, zipped it shut, and laid it on the table. It felt heavier than stone, but it carried my dignity, my history, and my fight. The countdown was nearly over. The courthouse smelled of polish and dust, the kind of place where reputations were either preserved or destroyed. I sat at the defendant's table, my hands folded over the leather folder that held my truth. Across from me, Henry strutted in like a man stepping onto a stage. His suit was sharp, his grin sharper. Anthony trailed behind, papers tucked under his arm. But his eyes didn't shine with the same confidence. When the judge called the session to order, Henry launched into his performance. His voice was smooth, rehearsed, dripping with false concern. "Your Honor," he began, "we are here because my wife's mother, Dorothy Hale, is no longer capable of making safe or sound decisions. She forgets things, she repeats herself, and she has misplaced important documents. It breaks my heart to say this, but she cannot manage her own affairs any longer. We simply want to ensure her comfort and safety at Sunset Manor." I kept my face still, letting his lies hang in the air like smoke. He painted me as a frail old woman, one who couldn't tell day from night, one who would accidentally burn her own house down. The more he spoke, the more the gallery murmured. I could feel eyes on me, weighing whether his story fit the woman sitting calmly in her seat. Henry gestured toward me dramatically. Even today, she insists she has the deed, the loan agreements, but she has misplaced them so many times that we fear for her stability. We fear for her future. The judge nodded solemnly, jotting down notes. My heart beat steady. This was his moment of triumph, or so he thought. When the time came for the judge to call a witness, Hermione's name was spoken. She rose slowly, every eye in the room turning to her. She stood between two worlds, the man she married and the woman who had raised her. For one breathless pause, she looked at Henry. He gave her a smile meant to reassure, his hand tightening on the table. He was certain she would play her part. Then she turned her gaze to me. My eyes met hers, steady and unflinching, giving her no plea, no pressure, only truth. The silence stretched so long you could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Henry smirked, convinced she was frozen by loyalty. Then Hermione inhaled sharply and stepped forward. Her voice shook at first, but grew stronger with each word. Your Honor, what my husband has told you is not true. My mother is not incompetent. She is clear, capable, and sharper than I have ever known her. I have proof. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Henry's head whipped toward her, his confident mask cracking. She reached into her folder and pulled out the printed emails. This is correspondence between my husband and Anthony Collins. Here, in Henry's own words, he wrote, "Once she signs, the house is ours." And here, she lifted another page, he admits his debts, tens of thousands of dollars, credit cards, unpaid loans. He has been desperate, and he planned to solve it by taking my mother's house. The judge leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Mr. Hale, do you contest these documents? Henry stammered, his voice no longer steady. Those are private marital communications, taken out of context. My wife is confused. She doesn't understand the financial complexity. Confused? Hermione shot back, her voice breaking with both anger and grief. I may have been blind, but I am not confused anymore. You lied to me, Henry. You lied about your debts, about your intentions, and you tried to turn me against my own mother. The courtroom erupted. Henry's face drained of color. He tried to laugh it off, but his voice cracked. She's just emotional. We all know how easily women— Enough! The judge interrupted, slamming his gavel. The sound echoed like thunder. I watched Henry sputter, cornered by his own arrogance, and in that moment, my heart swelled with a mixture of sorrow and pride. Hermione had chosen. She had found her voice, but Henry wasn't finished. He turned on her, his tone venomous. You'll regret this, Hermione. Without me, you'll have nothing. You think your mother can protect you? She'll drag you down with her. Hermione's tears fell freely, but she did not waver. She faced him with a strength I hadn't seen since she was a child. I'd rather have nothing than build a future on lies. The gallery gasped again, whispers flying. The judge called for order, but the damage was done. Henry's empire of manipulation had cracked in plain view, and I sat in silence, my eyes calm, my folder untouched, because the truth, at last, was speaking for itself. The courtroom felt like it had stopped breathing. Every eye was on Henry, who stood in the witness box with the swagger of a man who thought the law bent to his will. His voice rang sharp against the paneled walls. These claims are baseless. My wife has been manipulated by her mother. Dorothy is confused, incapable of understanding her own affairs. I am the one protecting this family, not dismantling it. Do not let one bitter old woman dictate the future of an entire household. Each word dripped venom, but Henry's tone carried the rhythm of a salesman, polished, rehearsed. I sat silently, my hands folded on the table. I refused to interrupt. Let him spin his lies until they tangled into knots too tight to undo. Henry turned his gaze toward Hermione, his wife, my daughter. You know me, sweetheart. You know I've only ever wanted the best for us. This isn't about greed. This is about building stability for our child, for our future. Please, don't let your mother twist this. Hermione's lips trembled, but she did not answer. Her silence cut Henry deeper than any outburst. Sensing weakness, he pressed harder. Think about the nights I worked late so we could keep the lights on. Think about the sacrifices I've made. Is this how you repay me? By siding with someone who's clearly slipping away into paranoia? Gasps rippled through the gallery. His mask was slipping, desperation seeping into every word. Then came the sound that shifted everything, the scrape of a chair against polished wood. Anthony Collins stood. He was a man who usually preferred shadows, but now his back was straight, his face pale yet resolute. He cleared his throat. The room went still. "Your Honor," he said, voice steady, though his hands shook, "I cannot allow these lies to continue." Henry whipped his head toward him, eyes blazing. "Anthony, sit down. You're my witness. We agreed. You signed off on this." Anthony lifted a folder, thick with printed papers, his fingers tightening around it as though it might burn him. He handed it to the bailiff, who carried it up to the judge. "These are the original emails," Anthony declared, "unaltered, authored by Henry Hale himself. In these messages, he outlines a plan to strip Mrs. Hale of her property under the guise of elder care. He bragged about debts being erased once the house was his. He laughed about how easy it would be." The gallery erupted in shocked whispers. The judge hammered his gavel, demanding order, but no sound could drown out Henry's howl of betrayal. "You liar! You miserable coward! After everything I trusted you with—" Anthony raised his hand, not at Henry, but toward the judge. His voice broke through Henry's fury with calm steel. 30 years ago, I watched another family lose everything in Savannah. Their land was stolen through forged documents. I was a young clerk then. I knew, but I stayed silent. That silence has haunted me every day since. I will not repeat that mistake here. His words cracked something inside me. For the first time, I saw him not as Henry's accomplice, but as a man burdened by ghosts of his own making. Henry lunged toward him, eyes wild, veins standing out against his skin. 2 bailiffs stepped forward, blocking his path. "You think this redeems you?" Henry shouted. "You were part of this. You signed those papers. You pushed this plan. Don't you dare pretend you're some hero now." Anthony didn't flinch. He looked at Henry, and for the first time, pity softened his face. "You used me. You used everyone. But the truth doesn't bend to your will, Henry. Not anymore." The judge leafed through the documents, his expression darkening. He read aloud one line that pierced the silence. "Once she signs, the house will be ours, finally free. The old woman will be tucked away, and we'll never have to hear her complain again." Each word echoed like a hammer striking steel. Hermione covered her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks. Henry thrashed against the bailiff's grip, his voice cracking into rage. "They're twisting this. Dorothy planted these lies. She manipulated Collins. The gavel slammed down again. "Enough! Mr. Hale, this court has heard sufficient evidence. You are remanded into custody for fraud, conspiracy, and elder financial abuse." The officers moved in. Handcuffs gleamed as they clasped around Henry's wrists. He jerked violently, shouting, "You can't do this! I built this family. I sacrificed everything. You'll regret this. All of you will regret this." Then he turned to Hermione, his face red, his voice breaking with a final venomous curse. "You think she saved you, but she's ruined you. You'll end up just like her, alone, abandoned, weak." Hermione sobbed openly, shaking her head, but Henry's words hit like knives. He twisted once more, his eyes burning into me. "And you, Dorothy, you smug witch! You think this is victory? You've destroyed your daughter's life. That's your legacy." I did not move. I held his stare with the calm of someone who had weathered storms he could never fathom. His hatred washed over me and disappeared like waves breaking against a cliff. The courtroom doors opened with a heavy groan. Henry was dragged through them, still shouting curses that dissolved into echoes. The doors slammed shut behind him. For the first time in months, silence felt like freedom. Anthony remained standing, his shoulders sagging as though decades of weight had finally slid from them. He turned to me. "Mrs. Hale," he said quietly, his voice raw, I cannot undo my part in this, but I can refuse to stay silent any longer. That is all I can offer." I gave a single nod. Not forgiveness, not yet, but acknowledgement. The judge's voice carried finality. "This court recognizes Dorothy Hale as competent and in full control of her affairs. The petition is denied. The matter of restitution will be addressed at sentencing." Relief crashed through me, fierce and unstoppable. I breathed deeply, filling my lungs as though for the first time in weeks. Hermione clutched my hand, her tears wet against my palm. Around us, the gallery buzzed with murmurs, but I focused only on the warmth of my daughter's grip and the quiet promise that Henry's chains had broken more than his freedom. They had shattered the illusion that power could silence truth. And in that silence, I felt something even stronger than victory, dignity restored. The courtroom emptied slowly, the heavy doors closing with a groan that seemed to seal the storm behind them. For a moment, the world stood still. Then Hermione rushed into my arms, her body trembling with sobs. Her tears wet my shoulder, and I felt the weight of months of fear leaving her frame. She clung to me like the child she once was, whispering, "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry." I stroked her hair, steadying my voice though my own chest ached. "You chose the truth, Hermione. That is all a mother could ever ask." The silence after Henry's outbursts was thick, but it carried a strange relief. Justice had spoken. Henry was gone in chains, and Anthony, though disgraced, had found a sliver of redemption. The court stripped him of his license, yet the judge acknowledged his late honesty and spared him prison. He left the courthouse pale, diminished, but lighter somehow. Weeks later, I made a choice of my own. The house, once my fortress, no longer felt like sanctuary. Too many shadows lingered in its corners. I sold it quietly, with dignity, and moved into a small brick apartment near Forsyth Park. From my window I could see the live oaks stretching their arms skyward, Spanish moss swaying like whispers of history. It was enough for me. Hermione visited often. Sometimes she came alone, sometimes with Emma, her little daughter whose laughter spilled through my rooms like sunlight. Watching Emma chase dandelion fluff in the park brought me a peace I thought I had lost. One afternoon, Hermione sat at my kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. Her face was tired, but her eyes no longer carried the blind haze of denial. She looked at me, voice soft but urgent. "Mom, I don't know how to forgive myself. I defended him for so long. I let him use me against you." I reached across the table, placing my hand over hers. We all want to believe in the people we love. That's not weakness. It's humanity. But there comes a moment when belief must give way to truth. You found that moment, Hermione. That's what matters. Her lips quivered. "Do you ever regret loving Dad so much, even though he made mistakes? Even though he trusted the wrong man and nearly lost everything?" I smiled faintly, remembering John's weathered hands, his earnest eyes. "No, because love is not about being flawless. It's about standing by each other and learning. He made mistakes, yes, but he also left me strength, and now I pass that to you." Emma toddled in then, clutching a stuffed bear, her cheeks flushed from running. She crawled into my lap, and I pressed a kiss to her forehead. Her small heartbeat against my chest reminded me why all the battles had been worth it. Hermione wiped her eyes, watching us. "What do I tell her when she's older, when she asks about her father?" I held Emma closer. "Tell her the truth, but tell it with care. Let her know that love without honesty crumbles. And tell her that her grandmother once stood in a courtroom and refused to surrender her dignity. That's the inheritance she will carry." Hermione broke into quiet tears again, but this time they were different. Tears of cleansing, of release. She whispered, "I want to be the kind of woman you are, Mom." I squeezed her hand gently. "Then promise me this, Hermione. No matter what you lose, money, comfort, even people, never let go of your dignity. That is the only will I leave behind. That is the only legacy worth passing down." Outside, the bells of a nearby church rang the hour. Emma clapped her hands at the sound, giggling. Hermione laughed through her tears, the kind of laugh that heals. As the sun dipped over Forsyth Park, the shadows stretched long across the grass. But I felt no fear of them anymore. My battles were behind me, my dignity intact. The future would not be easy, but it was honest, and that was enough. Thank you for being part of my journey.